Hi, Jensen.
Hi, Steve.
Great. Hi, Alex. Hope you're feeling better.
Hi, Dr. Shrike.
How you feeling?
Thank you. I'm getting there, getting better.
Good.
Thank you.
All right, I see the Q&A. Yep.
So I'm going to promote my other self as somebody that can record so that I can record the interpretation room.
Okay.
So I'll just leave that one running in the background and I'll make you the host of the actual meeting. And this meeting, the English version, will record in the cloud. That way I just have both of them that we can put out to the public after.
Okay, so I'm the host, or Alex?
Yeah, I'm going to make you the host in a minute. I just
Okay.
need to do all the other logistics
Sure,
first.
of course. Yep.
Right. All right, you are the host. Alexandra's in the interpretation room. That's being recorded there. You're being recorded here, and that's that.
Great. Thank you, Jensen.
You're welcome. If anything goes wild, just give me a call.
Okay. All
All
right.
right. I will see you tomorrow.
All right. Yeah, you on your cell if I have any
Yeah,
questions.
just call. Yeah, the phone number that we talked together with last week, just call that because I'll have that right next to me. So
Okay, let me just make sure. I think I have you in here.
yeah, not the school committee number. I mean, I have that one too, but it's the 317.
Okay. Well, I don't want to say it on the phone, but I mean on
That's
the
Kate's coming too, right?
yeah, Kate will be here. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So
Okay.
just call
All right,
me.
we're good. Thank you, Jensen. Appreciate it.
Have a good night.
You too. Mary,
Hello,
how are you? Okay,
I'm doing well.
I don't see you with the glasses that often.
I don't usually wear them when I'm like, it depends on how far away I am from the screen. So
I see.
in fact, they bother, I was reading, so now I'm going to take them off because you're all blurry.
Hmm. Liz, you ended up in the audience, huh?
I did. That's okay.
What's the snow forecast out there?
3
for
to
Friday?
6.
How much? 4 to 6?
I heard 3 to 6
3 to 6.
during commute.
Hmm.
Right during the commute.
Yeah, that's the latest I got pinged on my phone.
Yep. I haven't looked yet. Is there like how confident are they at this point? What it's when it's Wednesday.
I think they're pretty sure that it's coming. It's just,
When and how much exactly?
yeah, it's like the rain snow line, that whole thing, right?
Yep. Yep.
Sometimes they get it right and sometimes they don't.
All right, well, we got only a few people. I didn't expect there'd be a large turnout with everything happening, but we might be able to promote these folks to join us.
Mhm.
I think I recognize all the names there. I guess they may not want to be promoted to panelists. Let's just give it a couple more minutes.
Mhm.
All right, you know what? I'll promote these folks, see if they want to come join us, and then if not, we can send them back to the other side. I guess they can still keep their screens black if they want. Oh, declined. Okay. Yep. All right. Hey, Jeff, how are you? Oh,
Hello.
did you want to be promoted, Jeff?
Oh, I don't really care.
Okay. Hi, Miss Cop. How are you? Did you want to be promoted or you?
I'm fine. I'm fine. Just listening. Thank you.
Okay, great. No worries. Just thought I recognized the names, so. We recently had a Zoom bomb, and so we're being very careful. That's why. Okay. Hi,
I
Tracy,
promise
how
not
are
to
you?
do that.
What's that?
I promise not to do that.
Yep, I would hope so. I don't know if that's in your, I'm not gonna say anything about your background, Jeff, but all right, so I think we'll get started. I mean, I'm gonna try to go through, first of all, Happy New Year to everyone. And thank you for joining us. I didn't expect there'd be an enormous crowd with everything happening and swirling. We had a big turnout yesterday for Facebook Live that had over 100 people. So I think if this topic was to be about COVID mitigation and protocols, I think we get a huge crowd. But I do want to, this is the first of 2 sessions that we want to do around the ESSER 3 funding, and wanted to just engage with the community a little more than we did in the spring. Now that we've already had a few months of school, we're almost halfway through the school year and we have a sizable amount of funding to allocate over the next 3 years. So I was going to do a brief presentation, which I'll try to go through very quickly so that we can get to conversation and questions that folks might have. Yeah, Ann, if you want to join us, you can let us know. If not, you can stay on the other side. But I'll just start by sharing my screen here. Introducing, obviously, we have a couple folks with us. We have Assistant Superintendent for Employee Engagement, Finance and Employee Engagement, Mary DeLai. We have Deputy Superintendent Kate Carboni, our Chief of Public Relations, Liz Pulley-Wettengale, and Chelsea Banks, who is our Chief of Opportunity and Response. So, and we have our translator who's here as well. Oh, Ann says she's great on the dark side, so we'll keep her there. So we have, and we have a translator. Our interpreter Alex is with us as well. So I'm just going to share my screen, and this presentation is very similar to what I gave to the school committee right before break. And I wanted to, I'll just jump right in here and give you an overview. We shared this previously. We made some adjustments, but this is really throughout the period of the pandemic, this is what this has looked like in Salem. It's a busy slide. I think of note, and what we're talking about today is the 3 diamonds, ESSER 1, ESSER 2, and we're going to focus really on diamond 3. And those are the funding opportunities and the funding sources that we've had to support COVID response and relief since the start of the pandemic, right? And so you can see kind of when this money started to appear for us. And ESSER 3, which is the biggest chunk of money, which we'll talk about in a moment, came to us, right as we were shifting into the fall of this school year. ESSER 1 which was way back, as the pandemic started, is what we used for many of the major investments around health and safety. A lot of the PPE, cleaning supplies. And then we've added to that with some of our, with ESSER 2 over time. We've tried to reduce our class sizes. We've also invested in more custodial support. And none of ESSER 3 has been spent yet. We've spent all of ESSER 1, and Mary, you can correct me if I'm wrong, and a chunk of ESSER 2. And now we're talking about the spend, how to spend and our plans for spending ESSER 3. Okay, so moving forward. So here's what the funding looks like and the amount that we were allocated as a community, as a school district. This is independent of, I think, the 30 million the city received, right? This is what we've received as a school district over in the 3 buckets of money. ESSER 1, which was called CARES, ESSER 2, I have no idea what CRRSA stands for. And maybe Mary, you do, I don't know. And then ESSER 3 is ARP, which is the American Rescue Plan. And our total allocation is 15.8 million thereabouts. And you could see the end dates of when this funding needs to be spent by. Technically, each of these end dates had the total period of availability was determined by the statute. And in the statute, it granted an extra year for the funding. And so that end date is the true end date for each of these grant allocations. So it's a sizable chunk of money. Although I'm sure you're not surprised how quickly $15 million can go when you're in the middle of a pandemic. So a couple of facts. We're going to really focus on ESSER 3 because it's the largest of the buckets of funding. It's also, there's a requirement to engage community. There's also, and it's also the one that extends the furthest out. So ESSER 3, as we talked about, was signed into law on March 11th, 2021. And then, as I mentioned before, it can be spent through September 30th, 2024. And the purpose is to support the safe reopening and the sustaining of safe operations of schools while meeting students' academic, social, emotional, and mental health needs resulting from the pandemic. That's a very broad, web of what you can spend the funding on. Most of it's allowable under our title grants, which we receive every year, Title 1 through 4, or IDEA, which is our special education funding. So there are a lot of flexibilities. We'll go into a little more detail in a moment, but what's exciting about this and where there's an opportunity is that there aren't tremendous restrictions as long as it's really focused on the needs of, our ability to run in-person school safely and addressing the academic, social, emotional, and mental health needs of our students. So a couple of requirements. We had to publish a plan for safe return to school, which we did at the beginning of the last school year and this school year. We did revise our plan for this school year. We needed to submit an initial plan for the use of our funds, which we did on October 4th. Everything came very quickly. So we had to submit a preliminary plan on October 4th, which we did. We have not been approved or denied at this point. I don't believe, Mary, that we've heard any feedback as of yet. And we're required to consult with stakeholders, which I'll share in a moment. This is one opportunity to consult with stakeholders, but there have been others. There was engagement during the budget process, which say the FY22 budget process, not 21. And at least 20% of the award needs to be spent on lost instruction and investment in tutoring, class size, out of school programming, and that we do have to meet the maintenance of equity provision, which is so that we're not supplementing or supplanting, I should say, existing programs and services. And if people have questions about that later, that's something Mary is very well versed in. This is some of the data we collected during the budget process last spring. We will go through a similar process this year. What naturally we asked questions about preparing for the 21-22 school year from our constituents. And there was a series of budget forums last spring. Some of the audience members may have participated with staff, with community members. We did meet with students, or I had some focus groups with students. And this is what we learned from our community. And we also, I believe we had a survey that was sent out as well. And this is how we broke down the top 10 budget priorities. This is what we used to formulate our preliminary plan for submission on October 4th. But as with anything, we wanted to create additional opportunities because we knew we were going to learn quite a bit more about how school was going for kids. I'm not sure we predicted this variant and what's happening now, but it does give us an opportunity to pivot based on the feedback that we're going to receive here tonight and in subsequent sessions. So yeah, you have a chance to look at this. This is a slide we've shared multiple times over the last year. As we entered this school year and when we wrote our plan for ESSER 3, we made sure that our district priorities, our equity statement was at the forefront. And we had 5 key principles as we thought about the investments. These are not revolutionary investments. These are, I think, very sensible based on what we know about COVID and the impact that it's had on young people, you know, of how do we create multi-tiered systems of support, not just with academics, but around mental health and social emotional supports for young people. There's a lot of talk about loss, whether that's learning loss or social emotional, or the loss that students had around interacting with their peers. I think we prefer to look at it more as like unfinished or interruptions in their experience that we know we need to address in the experience of our young people. There's a really significant component that we felt had to be around family and community supports. We know our community was traumatized, tremendous impact on all families, and you know, in the city of Salem. So that was another big, you know, component of what we were thinking about for our investment. Health and safety. We've said we were going to lead with health and safety all along. We know the importance of running in-person school. Nobody doubts how much more valuable in-person school is than remote instruction. But as we've heard from teachers and families and community members, real emphasis on making sure that it was safe to come to school. And we knew we wanted to invest in making sure that we had the right protocols, the testing, the protective equipment, the HEPA filters, the HVAC systems, the ventilation, you know, the list goes on and on around health and safety. Oh, sorry. And then around professional learning for our staff. And, you know, again, none of us have encountered something like the pandemic. We knew we wanted to make sure that there was opportunities for, you know, for continued professional growth. Just as we had the health pandemic of COVID, we also had the racial pandemic that coincided with the arrival of COVID in our community. So this is a high level look at how we allocated funds for ESSER, the ESSER budget, which is really for the FY23, which is the next school year, and FY24, because we haven't touched ESSER 3 quite yet. Any of the funding and extra work we've done thus far is being funded out of ESSER 2 or out of our operating budget, but a lot is out of the ESSER 2 funding stream. So you could see how in those 5 areas that I just talked about, which are here in the left bar, hand bar, what the values are in you know, thousands of dollars, and what we've made as an investment. And then academic supports, which is the biggest chunk. You know, it's not that I don't think everything, one thing that's misleading is the academic support bucket. we do think a lot of these items do cross over to mental health and SEL, such as small class sizes. We think that the pre-K experience is significant. It's also significant for family and community supports. But when we put our proposal together, that's where these items fit under academic supports. So that's why this bucket is so large, right? And you can see how it's how it was allocated. Again, none of it's been spent. This is what our preliminary thinking has been. And, you know, there certainly will be a fair amount of shifting over the next few years and based on the input we receive in these conversations with the community. Again, this is a little more detailed here on each of the priorities on the left that we talked about, the 5, how much money we invested or proposed to invest, and then what we're describing as our investments, or what what we're investing in, a description of what those decisions were, right? And you could see it runs the gamut. I mean, it's no secret to the Salem community that we've invested a tremendous amount in early childhood in our pre-K program. You know, we funded it, the launch with ESSER 2, but we want to sustain it. We're obviously hoping to find additional funding to sustain it well beyond this period of grants, right? But it's a substantial launch in funding. At least $1 million, more than $1 million is invested in pre-K, right? So that call, we spent a tremendous amount in personnel related to one-time, multiple year interventionists, tutors, some mental health supports, behaviorists in many of our schools. There's a significant investment in professional development, specifically around our equity imperative, which is our training for around race, bias, and our equity work was something we heard a lot from our staff that was needed in our schools. So you could see how we broke down, the funding broke down here. But we want to get, we definitely want to get more input here tonight from those folks that have joined us. Okay, just a couple of considerations that I wanted to bring up. When ESSER 3, there was a quick turnaround from the release of the funding to our application. Our application still hasn't been approved, so I want to make that clear. Like, we also could be told that our application doesn't meet doesn't meet the bar or meet the expectation that the federal government has. Hopefully that's not the case, but we'll see what kind of feedback we get. Again, the dollars have not yet been spent. It's for ESSER 3. As I mentioned before, ESSER 2 is being used to pay for many of the priority items during this fiscal year and could be used for next year if there's any remaining funding. But we wanted to make sure that we protected ourselves for multiple years. So we did budget for multiple years through ESSER 3 all the way to fiscal year 24. We do think, as I mentioned before, that there's a nexus between the mental health and SEL supports that that I mentioned before. A lot of what we are calling academic supports, I do think, have a significant impact on the mental health and social emotional needs of our students. We also have had the good fortune of having extra funds at Collins for extended learning time, because we're one of the few schools in the state that have continued extended learning. So additional funding, the state had additional funding that allowed us to purchase extra mental health and SEL services specifically for Collins, an extra counselor that we're still advertising for, bilingual counselor. And there's a question here, and this that I'm reading around how will we deal with the funding cliff. It's a great question, right? Many of the staff paid for by ESSER 3 will require a new funding source beyond FY24. Some of the staff we're already working on how we're going to absorb it in our operating fund. Others, it's very clear these are one-time positions. We've been very diligent and thoughtful that some of these are one-time influxes, right, that are of need right now. Some of the social emotional staffing, some of the the tutoring and the interventionist. Some of you may say, well, this is going to last well beyond that period of time. We agree. I'm not sure we're going to be able to sustain all of the staff. And so those are the conversations we're having right now, is about what's the balance between what we should be, shifting in our operating fund and which are simply going to no longer be there, right, with beyond this period of time, beyond the grant period of time. We tried not to hire too many additional teachers. We have maintained our class sizes small by keeping the same number of teachers while our enrollment dropped, both for what's been historical attrition, but also because we do know there's a fair number of families that are homeschooling or have chosen not to send their students to kindergarten and keep them home. So our numbers have allowed us to have smaller class sizes, particularly at the younger grades. One of the areas we're very interested in soliciting input is around the mental health and SEL needs of our students. I think we all knew that it was going to be a struggle for our young people. I don't think we expected it quite as acute as what it's been this fall around, our youngsters, not just here in Salem, across the state, across the country. I do think we have to think about how do we allocate more funding or adjust some of our funding to increase the bucket around mental health and SEL supports. And I'm really interested to hear from all of you in that particular area. Given what we've learned, what you've all seen from your children, if you have children, some of you are professional educators, you work in after school programs. I noticed we have a college professor here. You're working with young people and young people, your perspective, we have obviously teachers who are part of this, their perspective is invaluable. So we're going to ask for input in a second. We'll take some questions, but we have a couple of questions for input. Like, what aspects of the plan that you heard, I know it was very brief, resonate with you, and we want to take notes on that. And then what additional ideas do you have for us on the use of ESSER funds? And again, I'm selfishly asking around specifically SEL supports, mental health supports, behavioral supports for youngsters. Really want to listen to what you have to say in those particular areas. And we'll do that in a moment. I did want to make folks aware that we do have, we're going to have a session in 2 weeks for staff only. That's on January 19th, and that we will have a public community session. Again, it was supposed to be in person. I really do not like these, I do not like these virtual sessions, but for the month of January, we put a pause on in-person meetings outside of school. And so we'll do another virtual session in January. We certainly could do in-person sessions, hopefully, if things subside beyond January. We're taking additional input via the superintendent email address at salemk12.org. So, and then finally, we are going to have a collaborative budget process like we did last year this spring with forums and surveys and so forth, which, while these are separate funding streams, we have to look at all our funding sources in terms of how to best support our young people. And that input is going to help us design both our operating budget and how we use these extra funds. Okay, so I'm just going to come off of share here. And it looks like we have some additional audience members who I'm happy to invite to join us if they want. Audience members, you might notice that we invited some folks to join us because it's a small group. You can decline my invitation if you so choose, but I'm going to invite you to be a panelist if you'd like to join us. Let me do that. Recognize most of the names here. Okay, but your call if you want to join or not. I do want to first take any questions that people have before we go into an input session. And I noticed there was a question. Catherine Bloom had asked about grant funding, and I think I addressed the cliff. It is something we're going to have to grapple with, clearly, and no one reminds me of that more than Assistant Superintendent Delay, that there is a cliff coming, and so we have to be very cautious about how we, you think use our funding. And Lisa Hanson, the wait list for mental, well, Lisa, you're here. Do you want to ask your question directly?
Sorry, I'll unmute myself. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, I can hear
sorry.
you. Yeah.
My son is on a Zoom also. My comment was just that the wait list for kids seeking mental health services, even
Yep.
with parents who have the skill set and ability to advocate for them, is like 6 months plus long.
Yep.
And we don't have a magic wand, but if there's money that we can dedicate to supporting some of those kids who
Yep.
need services and just simply can't get them,
Yep.
that seems like it would be a good place to allocate some money. That's
Yeah,
my input.
Yeah, Lisa, I think I agree. And even if it's not in the form of counselors, if it's through using our funds to contract with other partners to provide those services in school. Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion. I couldn't agree with you more. I'm hearing more and more of that from families. So yeah, I'm just going to take some notes here. Jeff, you have your hand raised.
Yes, and I think I will have a little bit more to say about what Lisa just said in a little while.
Yeah.
One very specific question starting out is, I noticed that we had a line item for pre-K, and I think that the best thing we could possibly do for our school district is have universal pre-K. When I go and read about ESSER expense eligibility, it seems to be very much K to 12. So I'm hoping you can talk a little bit about whether or not that really fits there, or if we need to find a different funding source for that. And then I absolutely have some social emotional learning comments to make later.
Okay. Yeah. Well, when we open it up, definitely we would love to hear that. Mary, do you want to say anything about that or about pre-K?
I don't really have much to, I mean, I think that there's a provision in the allowable expense language that says that we can expend funds on any programs that are supported by our entitlement grants. And I think when you read the language, I think we would be able to, is that the question, whether or not preschool is an allowable expense?
Yeah.
It basically, is it an allowable expense? And listen, I hope it is, and I hope we have a way to continue it after the fact, because I think there's nothing more valuable.
Kate, did you want to jump in there? I saw your
Yeah, I
hand.
just want to say that we are paying for it this year on ESSER 2, and that grant was approved. So they have deemed it an allowable expense. So we just, rolled it in. Our hope is that the state and federal government are going to release grants that are specific to pre-K, and that we'll be able to lift it off this and, put some of the expenses, on those grants that are specific to building sustainable preschool programs. So fingers crossed on that.
Any other questions before we just open it up to folks for your thoughts and feedback? Okay. All right. So I think the two questions we're interested in is like, what resonates with you? And then what would you advise us in terms of adjustments we should make and other ways, the more specific you can be, I think the more helpful to us of like how you would actually use the dollars over the next 2 to 3 years. And so we'll take comments since we're a small group. You can either say share what resonates with you, or you can just jump in on what adjustments you think we should be making. And those of you who are in the dark side or on the other side, you can, feel free to enter in the Q&A your comments. We'll take those and we're writing those down and noting those as well. So we'll turn it over to the audience. Anybody can jump in. Okay, Hillary, I see your.
Yeah, so I work with Leap for Education. So obviously I'm coming from an organization that works in the out of school time space, but I guess I'm hoping that what resonated with me was your references to having the vacation schools and vacation academies. I'm hoping that also includes more money for more summer programming like we had last summer. We had a lot of robust programming. I would say that even during the regular school year, assuming we can find staff, that
Right.
having more after-school programming would be extremely beneficial. In terms of finding staff, potentially, offering more money, maybe to get more staff there would be helpful, although it's a little easier now than it was in the fall. So fingers crossed. But I think in terms of the SEL piece, I mean, we're really seeing very much of that. I think in this last summer, we were sort of surprised, like it was like the kids forgot how to interact with each other. I mean, so a lot of our students have challenges interacting, and middle school in general is a challenging age that way, but it was sort of like they forgot how to, like, someone how to ask someone to be a friend or just do a pickup game or whatever. And we have during the fall sometimes a lot of drama, particularly with the girls going on. So I think that having some more small group, more like social worker, counselor groups within the after school setting could be very beneficial. And we don't have the staff for that, either in money or in terms of personnel, but that would be a way to kind of incorporate some of that more intensive SEL piece. I mean, certainly we incorporate that in our program, but we need people that have more focused time on that and a higher level of expertise on how to do that, to incorporate some counseling. Because the summer we had a number of kids who had to have like suicidal audits during the summer, who were just coming back into groups. We haven't had any of that in the fall, but clearly there's just a need to sort of have kids talk things through more, and to have more structure for that within the out of school time setting could be a beneficial place to do that.
Hillary, do you guys have counselors on staff at all during the after school programming, or no?
We don't.
You don't? Okay. And the summer, also not during the summer.
In the summer, we benefited from the fact that we had a behavior specialist and also a facilitator who were trained in that, and so they were able to fit in as needed. But it is not a position that we have that we fill in, like that's a slot we have in our budget or in our programming. I think it would be very beneficial. I would love to do particularly some, maybe some gender-based programming, smaller groups, because there's just a lot of angst among them, even in how they interact with their friends. One day they're friends,
Yeah.
the next day they're a mess.
Yeah,
So I think it would be very helpful.
got it. Thank you. It's helpful, your perspective. Others? Jeff, you said you wanted to share some more. I've never known you to be quiet.
Right. I would say that I think that the SEL area is really incredibly important.
Yeah.
It happens that in my life that the people that we sort of fell into a group with during this all have girls who are the same age as my 8-year-old daughter. And I also have a 11-year-old son who feels very left out of all of that. And like completely like he's been left alone, to the point where, and I'll be very blunt here, he's expressed some suicidal ideation this late fall, early winter. And I mean, he's on multiple waiting lists for therapy. I reached out to the school. They're trying to provide what they can, but they don't have much to provide either. I don't know, and honestly, I don't know that money helps here, because I just think there's very little resource available, no matter how much money you have to pay for it. My wife is a social worker. They are short multiple social workers where she works. So I don't know, but I feel like that has to be a really, really important focus area. Just because, I mean, without it, learning doesn't happen.
Yeah. I mean, the shortage is definitely there. And the agents. Yeah, go ahead.
To be clear, I feel like the school and the district has tried really hard to help. I really do. I have never had more confidence in Salem Public Schools than I have today.
Well, we appreciate that, but we're all, this is new territory for all of us as well. And so, yeah, I mean, I think there might be, I'm curious if people have other thoughts of like, independent of finding people that just aren't out there, you know, you mentioned Hillary, small groups. Are there ways that we can kind of facilitate and create opportunities for young people during the school day that can help build back some of the socialization that they're struggling with, or they lost during the period of the pandemic?
I do want to add that my child's school, Carleton, has created a sort of small group boy, similar age, anxiety thing that he's participating in. And I think it is helping some.
And who's that led by, Jeff? The counselor?
I want to say it's somebody at Carleton. I don't
Okay.
remember her name off the top of my head.
Okay. Lisa, go ahead.
Sorry. I think I was just going to add that one of the struggles I sense from in the schools is even if we have the resources in school to dedicate to some of what Jeff is addressing, the pull between we need to get through the content, like there's a real push to get through the content because these kids are behind, right? Like our fifth graders are learning what they should have learned in fourth grade and we're already behind. So the idea of taking time out of the day to address, like Jeff is talking about, whether it's small group or therapy or whatever could be offered during the school day. I think I'm not a teacher, but I see that struggle in our school. But the same way we talk about, you know, hungry kids can't learn, you got to feed them first. I would say the same is true here. Like Jeff's son in that circumstance is not going to be learning. So I don't know what the answer is. I just kind of want to call that out as sort of an obvious challenge, that even if we have resources in the building, we've got teachers who are trying to catch kids up after such significant learning loss. I don't know how to address that, but
yeah, I think that's a real
challenge.
sentiment from teachers. Absolutely. We hear that from teachers quite a bit. Kate, do you want to say anything about that? Because I know we've sent some messages to staff about, like, you know, this race to make everything up in 1 year academically. It's not realistic.
No, I think that's exactly right. And like Lisa says, I think that's a real struggle. It weighs on everyone's mind that there's this urgency that kids have had disrupted schooling for, you know, almost 2 years now. And we continue to experience that with teachers being out, you know, because they're sick themselves or they have a family member, a child who's sick, with, you know, the need to quarantine and whatnot. So we have tried to, you know, communicate a message of, we want to use our time well, but we have to pace ourselves. And we know that we're not going to recover all the interrupted learning in 1 year, right? So we've got to be in this for the long term, be really, you know, thoughtful. We've tried to streamline like our assessments so we can really pinpoint, you know, where kids need extra support so that we're really, you know, precise in our teaching and whatnot. But we have, you know, communicated to teachers to, you know, like if you need to huddle up, circle up, like in the middle of a class, like you got to put academics aside and do that. And that teachers are the best ones to know when that's needed, and that they need to feel they have the permission to do that. And we know that, you know, in the small group, I think is, you know, really resonates with me. It gives kids an opportunity to be with an adult in a small, you know, a small group setting. And so I think that helps, but it does make me think of an article that I read actually just this week about leveraging small groups to promote social emotional learning. And I'm thinking if the tutors are, and the additional adults that we've put in our classrooms, if they're sort of a point of that we could do some training around some social emotional, like how to deliver those kinds of learnings to kids, so that the small groups are not just focused on academics, but on, you know, building those social emotional skills. And, you know, like Hillary, what Hillary was saying really resonates. Like 1 minute kids are, you know, friends, and next minute they're not, and that we've got to, you know, help kids reconnect and so forth. So I think that is a constant, is ever present on our minds and constant. And how do we balance, you know, the mental health, social emotional learning needs of our kids and the academics.
There's a question here from Kathleen about when we talk or a comment, when we talk about SEL for our students, we need to make sure we are including similar supports for our staff. Yeah, I mean, I would just put an, you know, an asterisk, I mean, a star on that. I mean, that's clearly, you know, I am concerned about the profession of teaching in general. I mean, many of you know, I live with a teacher myself, so I hear and I hear quite a bit from our own teachers. It's a tough time to be in schools, juggling so much, the anxiety of the virus and the challenges with trying to get kids caught up. It's, you know, it's something we have to pay attention to, not, you know, as I think an entire profession. I mean, people are not going to want to stay in teaching and come to teaching, you know, if we don't think about the health and wellness of our staff, which, you know, is something that the mayor is, and I have, you know, have had a number of conversations, and we want to explore if anybody has any revolutionary ideas around that as well. But, you know, folks are tired and they've been on overdrive on something that we thought was not going to last beyond a couple of months. And now we're almost at year 2, right, of this pandemic. So thanks for pointing that out. Other comments, suggestions? Catherine, I don't know if you had your hand up. I thought I saw you. I don't want to put anybody on the spot here, but, oh, Lisa? Oh,
Sorry.
Catherine, go ahead, go ahead.
So I am, as you know, I'm a college professor.
Yes.
Salem State, and I also have children in the system, or one that will soon be in the system. And I, from a college professor standpoint, you know, these kids are filtering up to college, and there's like, we have to treat them more like they're 15 or 16-year-olds, like, because the learning loss is that significant. The kids that are typically our students are a little more together and a little more mature and a little more put together than they've been the last year and a half. But so what I'm saying is it's translating. So as you know, I'm a big proponent of more expanded partnerships with the university. And I think that given the lack of mental health workers, social workers, everybody that's out there, the best thing that we can do is expand on partnerships within the community, both at the college as well as with some of these after school programs, and really pool our resources together a little bit more, because what we're facing is a societal problem that is bigger than K-12 for sure. But we also have to start being creative with our solutions, given that there's a lack of workers, and that lack of workers is going to be there for a number of years, if not forever at this point. So on one hand, I'm an outdoor educator. The one thing that you can build in the outdoors is a lot of the social emotional pieces with kids. So doing more programming outdoors, we have a lot of great resources within Salem. And I've got partners who are, and associates that are outdoor educators as well. You can build in confidence, you can build in how you build friendships, you can build in a lot of the educational pieces, math, science, social studies, history, all of those things into other programming opportunities. And I think that that's where we're going to have to get creative and allow for creativity, not just in the classroom, but like in the after school programs, and really like maybe pull together a bigger community group of people that are interested in education and our kids, and really start thinking about this holistically. You're sort of doing this here because we've got another outdoor, or not outdoor educator, but after-school educator here. And like if we pool LEAP and Boys and Girls Club and Salem State beyond the School of Education, but also with the School of Education, we can really create something dynamic, I think. So I think just starting to think more broadly about who we are, what
Yeah.
resources we have available, and how we can utilize them. There's a lot of really great research on this. So as always, I'm happy to work with you.
Mhm. No, and obviously we've got the budding conversations with Salem State around some of those partnerships, but
Mhm.
yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, getting kids outside of the walls of school, thinking about, dynamic ways to, relevant, dynamic, interactive ways for them to learn. Kids never miss school when there's a field trip or when they know something exciting is happening in school. And so how do we create more of those opportunities for young people as more routine during the school day? I think you're right. I mean, but public school systems are really traditional in their thinking. Probably colleges too.
Yeah.
Not you, Dr. Bloom.
No.
But
Definitely
we're
not.
certainly very provincial, and that's something, I certainly agree. And there's certainly assets that we can play to more in this community, out of school time partners like LEAP and Boys and Girls Club and the Y, and partners like Salem State for sure. Lisa, you had your hand raised.
Sure. Two sort of quick-ish questions. First is just about sort of existing assets that we have. My first question, aside from just Saltonstall, which I know about, are there behavior specialists in each school at this point? We had one at Saltonstall for a couple of years, and then he left. My understanding is because that position was elevated from a behavior specialist position, which I believe is a para, to an adjustment counselor. And that person then left, and we now have someone with the title of behavior specialist. So it's unclear to me what is happening district-wide on that. Is there a behavior specialist in each school who's dedicated to responding to kids who need that kind of attention? And is that a para level? Is that an adjustment counselor level? That I'm sort of unclear on that. And that has always been important in my 6 years of experience in SPS, and I would think is even more important now as we're seeing the behavioral issues. So if you can just speak to what the current situation is in the schools for that. That's question one. And then question two, to the professor's point earlier, what is our community engagement, director of community engagement, I don't know her exact title. Is she tapping community resources on this topic to see what else might be available in terms of partnerships to address some of these needs? So two rambling and separate questions, and I'll mute myself and let you speak, Dr. Sprague.
So Kate, do you want to talk about the behavior specialists, and I can maybe talk about the second question?
So we do have behavior specialists in each school. Currently, those were added. We didn't at first, in our budgeting, we try to afford our principals autonomy. And in some cases, they decided to trade those for other kinds of things in years past. But this year we felt it was really important to bring those back. So we made those available to the schools that didn't currently have them. And we, had some difficulty again with hiring, but I think we're in good space with that. They are not adjustment counselor level positions. They are in the same unit, if you will, as the paraprofessionals. We host job-alike meetings with them, so we convene them together as a group. I think it's twice a month to do training and sort of norm across their practice, and that is led by Molly Robinson and Adam Colantoni out of our student and family support department.
Yeah, and we're really trying to build out the Department of Student Services, which is brand new this year, which is really overseeing all this, the SEL, the mental health, the behavioral support. Admittedly, it's it's a new department. We took Joe Conrad's position, who was here before, that became Mr. Colantoni's position. And, sort of the training and the support of the behaviorists falls under their purview. Because I think, they weren't always getting the support and the direction and the guidance they needed. We do need to make SEL, part of our tier 1 experience for all kids. And I think, that's part of the vision around creating this department, is to make sure that there's attention given to while they're all linked, there's the behavior, mental health, and then there's teaching explicit social emotional skills to young people, right? And so, I hope that this department continues to grow and strengthen over time, and we should see some stronger kind of alignment across schools around making sure that we're honoring the importance of this work and ensuring that, like, behaviors, I don't want them to be bouncers. And I've seen too often that, like, their job is to, like, come and bounce kids out of classrooms, literally, but rather trained in de-escalation, and they can provide the kind of socialization and guidance and coaching to kids, and provide some coaching to teachers who may be struggling with the challenging students. So I think it's sort of reinventing what that role is. We have some outstanding behaviorists in the district that have been here for a while. I'm not sure all of them had that level of strength. A hope is now we're, to try to make sure that there's some level of common skill set that they have across the schools. The second question around the community partnership, I'm not sure if you're talking about you're talking about community, you're not talking about families, you're talking about like community partners and so forth. Yeah. So, I see that as a lot of my role as a superintendent, is to build those relationships. If it were a more normal time, there would be that I do see is that a big part of my work is to bring in those resources and build those relationships with some of those community partners. Some of that work, Emily Ullman does a lot of that work specifically with now pre-K, and we really focused the energies around we're trying to build universal pre-K. We have to work with, I say that not as a chore, but we have a responsibility to work with our partners in the community, our child care providers. That's where a lot of her time and focus is around. We're investing in 4, I think it's 3, right, Kate? 3 child care providers. We've used some of our dollars to help them improve and enhance the quality of their offerings. And so that's a lot of her focus right now. In terms of other partners, that's really like I said, that's really my work. I'm doing a lot of the work with trying to connect with Salem State and with actually Dr. Bloom, as well as some of the business community around how we can leverage their support in what we're trying to do at the high school level. So let's see. And Emily Ullman's role, while it does say community relations, the other part of her work is very much focused on our after school providers. So she's the liaison with the Y, with LEAP, with Boys and Girls Club, and all the out at school time, our extended learning time here at Collins, our vacation academies. She oversees all of that work as well. Let's see, there's a question here. Has there been any creative ideas thrown around regarding after school and summer program besides the standard partnerships? I presume everyone is dedicating a portion of funds here. Anyone proposing anything creative? Are there any local, regional, national groups where folks are sharing ideas? It's sad. There's not enough national discussion right now on, I think people are in survival mode, sadly, trying to get out of that and have these conversations about how we reinvent the experience for young people, and how do we reinvent the types of programs that we offer kids, and how do we reinvent the profession. I think too many, I will give Mayor Driscoll tremendous credit here. She's pushing this conversation. It's like, how do we be innovative right now? And it's hard to engage people right now because they are in pure survival mode around just, I'm just being frank and honest around getting, making sure that we can run school day to day. It's really important, though, that we get up on the balcony and we start having the conversations that you're talking about, Kathleen. I think everyone's struggling with staffing right now. One of the things we had some success with last year as an innovative model that I'd love to build on is we ran a CTE program for middle school students last year at Salem High School, which was very well received. I'd love to continue to grow that program, even for younger students to try our vocational programs, our shops at Salem High School. Kate, I don't know if you want to say any more about the out of school space as well.
Not necessarily. I would like to go back. To some of the earlier comments around the community partnerships. I think there's an opportunity for us to connect to a strategy that we was starting to get some momentum and then fizzled out a little bit, which was we had a children's cabinet that had a lot of the leads from lots of the big organizations, community-based organizations in Salem, from the university, and really coalescing around this idea of that thriving children is a community-based effort. It can't just all be on the schools. And so Emily was leading that work. And I think through the pre-K initiative, there's an opportunity with convene some of those folks to focus on the pre-K work. So I'm hoping that can be a reinvigoration of that work. In terms of the after school partnership, I mean, I think Steve, you're exactly right. Like there's not a lot of like national information coming. We don't get a lot of information from DESE other than through our 21st Century grants, which we have at 4 of our schools. So at Collins, Horace Mann, Bates, and what's the fourth one? Bentley. But that again, the staffing has been a real challenge for us. We've gotten the after school programming up and running, but not to the degree or the volume that we had hoped for at this time, because we're just finding that staff are not interested in extending their day. They're just exhausted from the school day. So I do think it's a space that could use some good heads around, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I will say the age group that I most worry about is our middle school kids right now. Not that, but that's where we see the greatest need. One thing that I have seen at Collins and at Saltonstall that is really well received and kids are really excited about are the enrichment, the clubs that they have during the school day. What do they call them, Chelsea, at Collins? The
electives at Collins, the Friday afternoons at Saltonstall.
Yeah, and Saltonstall has the Friday afternoons, right? But like the podcasting, the culinary experience that the kids are having, the robotics. I mean, those are the things that I hear. I mean, I'm in the hallway here. I hear what kids talk about. That's where the most energy comes from. And so how do we replicate more of those experiences for young people, both during the school day and in the out of school time? Because that's what they come to school for. And they're most excited about. I just think we could be offering more of that, especially in this moment in time. Other thoughts, input? I've probably talked too much here. Lisa, you have your hand. There you go.
I'm going to be fast because my house is loud, but I was just going to mention what you just said about Friday Club at Saltonstall and thinking about every kid needs a reason to come to school. Some kids, they come to school because it's art that day and they love art. Some kids come to school because they have football practice and that's their reason. And if you ask 100 kids at Saltonstall what their favorite part of school is, I will conservatively say 70%, 70% of them are going to say Friday club. Maybe it's more than that. But again, it's like that is a reason that they wake up and they're happy to go to school that day. So I want to kind of reinforce what you said, and that's really been my experience as being a Friday club leader and seeing how that's a reason to get up and want to be in school. And it's pizza day. So Friday club and pizza day, that's,
Right. So
Anyways,
how do
but
we
thank you
rep-
for having that in mind.
Yeah, we got to think about how we replicate that. And we also should talk to kids about what they really want, right? Like, I mean, that really should drive, I mean, as much as parents are valuable, we should talk to kids about like, what would you like to see more of in school that's going to help you feel safer, more supported, more excited, more engaged in school. We should think about how we replicate those experiences.
I can tell you that a lot of them will say more recess, and I really support that.
Yep. Even when it's 20 degrees or lower, Jeff?
Yes.
I have a lot of people complaining about that right now, so
Tell them to go home.
I'll send them to you.
That's fine. I'll talk to them.
All right. Other thoughts? Anybody who hasn't had a chance to jump in that wants to, either from the crowd or, or from the panelists here.
I hope that you all know that as much as sometimes we're critical, we really see the hard work you're all doing. And I couldn't appreciate it more. And I think we all have to acknowledge and recognize that there are no easy answers here. And I thank y'all for showing up every day.
Thank you. But there's certainly a lot of work left to do here. And, this is not going to, we also need to think about this in a multi-year, we have to have a multi-year plan to support our kids through this.
On that point, you talked about a little bit earlier about how you just cannot make this all up in a year. I think that's completely true. And my grandmother, who had 5 children, if she heard something about her daughter Allison in 3rd grade, who was maybe a little bit behind on this, that, or the other thing, would respond with, well, I've never met an 18-year-old who can't do X that you're talking about today. She'll get there. I think that's a beautiful sentiment, and I agree with it wholeheartedly.
All right, thank you. Okay. Well, I've taken some notes here. We also have a transcript of this. We also recorded this today, and we're going to do this again for staff. I see that Ann Berman is on in the audience. We hope to promote this for, in our staff only conversation. I'd also love Hillary to engage some of the after school providers, and the partners in a similar conversation. So I might, you've kind of triggered me to think about maybe doing some engagement with them, those partners. And then we have another session coming up at the end of January. Like I said, again, we're going to do forums on the budget as well. Mary is working on that as we speak, as we're rolling out the budget process. We're going to want to hear from you as we present our budget for the upcoming school year. And that's going to be another opportunity to weigh in on how you think we're spending our funding. But if you have ideas, Kathleen mentioned, whether we engage with other providers or after school programs. If you see anything that you think we should look into, please send it our way. If you have specific ideas, I really like this notion of, creating small groups. I'm leaving thinking about how do we create the kinds of mental health supports and SEL supports that may not be a counselor, hiring a direct staff member, but how do we create similar opportunities in the schools to give kids that in small groups, whether that's through our tutors, whether that's through behaviorists, whether that's through the activities we provide, because there's other ways to help address mental health of students beyond just the one-to-one, meetings with a professional. That's great, but there isn't a line out the door right now of those folks. And we could hire 50 more counselors and it wouldn't do justice to what the needs of kids are right now. So leaves me thinking about, how we can be thoughtful and innovative around creating those spaces within our schools. So any last comments, questions? All right, we'll let everybody get back to their lives. I know there's snow on the way and I start stressing out when I hear there's snow in the forecast. So stay tuned for that for Friday, but everybody have a great night. Thank you for your time. Those of you on the other side, thank you for joining. And you can always send your ideas and thoughts via email as well. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.